Welcome to Cybersecurity Luminaries, History and Heroes, a series aimed to highlight the profession's humble beginnings and the men and women who paved the road for all of us. This series is brought to you by Candy Alexander and Cailin Sullivan, your co-hosts from the Cybersecurity Refined and Feral podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to a special installment of Cybersecurity Refined and Feral. We're going to be interviewing a very special person for our Cybersecurity History and Heroes series. As you may recall from seeing previous episodes, we'd like to call out some of the very special people that have had an impact on our profession from the early days. Want to capture that oral history to make sure that we recognize and celebrate the history and don't make the same mistakes over and over again. So, Cailin?
So today we're actually going to be welcoming Bill Brenner. We're absolutely thrilled to have him. He is a journalist and editor, content strategist, and has a very powerful voice for change in this industry. He's held previous roles at places like CSO Magazine and the Salt and Hash blog. Currently, he brings his insights as the SVP of Audience Content Strategy at Cyber Risk Alliance. He is a veteran reporter who has transitioned his eyes for compelling stories from the police beat to the server room.
Well, beyond the headlines and the technical deep dives, he's also known for his incredible honesty on his personal platform, the OCD Diaries, where he advocates for mental health and resilience, proving that our greatest strengths often come from facing our deepest challenges.
So everybody join us with extending a huge welcome to the one and only Bill Brenner. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here on Cybersecurity Luminaries, Histories, and Heroes.
Thank you.
So, did we miss anything?
Glad to be here. No, it's funny as you were going through, I really loved from the police beat to the server room. I've never really thought of it in those words. But yeah, I mean, I'm honored to be here. As I look at my own history, I think a lot of it has been a case of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
As opposed to being some special, beacon of light. I've just been making my way through the last couple of decades and have been lucky enough to just have, the best friends.
That's definitely
colleagues.
Something that we hear from a lot of people that we interview in this series is that they're just like, yeah, firefighter, I'm just doing my job. Like,
yeah, that's a great analogy. And it is true. It's, we never set out to be cybersecurity heroes and, doing all those remarkable things. And then when you really stop and think about it, or somebody approaches you, Bill, like, we just said from the, police beat all the way up to the server room, it's like, oh, hey, yeah, never thought of it that way. So you're not alone. And I think and that's why we're both snickering as well as you, is that, when you really stop and think about those things in that perspective, it's quite amazing. So let's talk about when you started your career in easy for me to say, traditional journalism, covering the cops and the, courts from, the Eagle Tribune? And then what was that specific turning point that made you shift your focus over to technology? Because, and then let's talk about the year, because how does that happen? And this is a while ago.
Yeah, so I started my career, yeah, as a reporter, as an editor. Um, Spent my early days covering going to the courthouse in Lynn District Court in Massachusetts, and sitting there all day watching people get arraigned, and
Yes.
thinking, "Wow,
Yeah.
when you think you have problems, just spend a morning here." Um, but I think the defining moment in terms of when I decided I didn't want to be doing just the basic newspaper man thing anymore was 9/11. Um, I was caught up in the chaos of the newsroom that morning. A scenario that played out all across the country in a lot of newsrooms, but I just
Right.
remember feeling useless. So it was an important job to capture the story, especially at the Eagle Tribune, because a lot of the victims on Flight 11 and 175 were from the Merrimack Valley, which is the region the Eagle Tribune serves. And so this is in no way about minimizing the importance of the work that was done back then. But for me personally, I started asking questions, in a world gone mad,
Mm-hmm.
is this the best that I can do? Um, and I was actually trying to
Really?
find something in the healthcare sector. And as it turns out, one job that crossed my desk was to be a news writer for searchsecurity.com, which way back then was part of Tech Target, which today is Informa Tech Target. And I went in, I did the interview with the editor, Ann Seda, who has remained a really good friend of mine.
Oh.
I like to refer to her as my cybersecurity mom, because she really nurtured me into this industry. Um, and when I started writing about cybersecurity, and back then it was um, very, very niche. It's not like today where every day, if you look at the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Washington
Mm.
Post, there's some kind of cybersecurity related article on the front page, and it just wasn't like that back then. I actually
Oh.
started on the Monday after the Sasser worm broke out, and so that was my crash course into what is a computer
So
worm,
they threw
what
you
is
in
a
the deep end of the
vulnerability,
pool.
what is malware, and yeah, they did. I mean, again, the right place at the right time. I just happened to be starting right as Sasser was going on, so I was able to really start with something that you could sink your teeth into and unpack. And the thing throughout the journalism part of my career that I've always tried to cling to is, okay, you take a server room, to go back to that description. It's just a room full of computers, right? And we know what it powers.
Mm. Right.
But how does that connect back to the humans that are trying to protect it and are using it for everyday life? And so that's really where I tried to make a name for myself, being able to really stick to the human
Yes.
element of
Absolutely.
all of these technical topics. Um, so yeah, and then from there, um, I went to CSO and was managing editor and also wrote the Salted Hash
Yeah.
blog. still one of the best blog names ever. I can't take credit for that. My editor-in-chief at the time, Derek Slater, that was all him. He had that
It seems
kind of
to
not
be
all
like
there in the head sense of humor,
a common characteristic of cyber people. For whatever
which
we
could have
do have
brilliant
a
results.
really strained, warped sense of humor and perspective, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still,
Exactly.
in a lot of
I
It's
know.
respects, I'm
just a
still
coping
12 years
mechanism
old
for the
mentally.
stress. It's like I either laugh about it or I'm going to scream and cry.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, I like to think of it
Yes.
as the thing that gets me through what we all go through. Um, a lot of my friends in security, uh, our relationship is
Yeah.
basically calling each other names and zinging each
Yes.
other, and
Yes.
and
Absolutely. So, when you went
so.
to CSO magazine, that like I'm thinking back to like when I first started,
Mhm.
right? There was just like, I think like maybe one or two magazines that were dedicated to our profession. And that was, Information Week, I think, was one perhaps. And then quickly when CSO magazine came on the scene, that became the premier, um, you know, uh, media for covering our topics and concerns. What do you remember as being some of the most prolific stories that really came out of that magazine?
So the thing that was always interesting to me with CSO was that it didn't just focus on the cyber part of security, it focused on the physical part as well. And so Derek Slater, in my first weeks there, I remember his big project, he was all excited about it, was this interactive, for the website, this interactive infographic called Joe's Office or somebody's office. Um, and you're looking around the office for signs of things that are not good
I
security
remember that.
practices. The
Yep.
computer is open with everything on the monitor. The He also had this odd obsession with bollards at the
Yeah.
time that I used to, make fun of. And we toured a building in Cambridge, and which company was it for? It was for one of the big pharma, but it was a green building and a secure building
Oh.
where they kind of
Mm.
mix security features with natural beauty, and that included like the bollards. But in terms of topics at the time, um, things were still pretty niche,
Yes.
but we were starting to see things like Stuxnet. We were starting to see cybersecurity becoming a Washington, D.C. issue. And of course, that's
Yep.
when former President Obama hired
Yeah.
Howard Schmidt to go and take on that role. More on that later. But that's when you started to see the start of it taking root as a
Right.
um,
Right. I mean,
national
it seems like
security concern.
we've in the profession have always really battled, if you will, to get it to be more mainstream and understood that it's not just a technology issue, right? And here we are, how many years later, and we're still fighting that. What, like, here's a bomb. Where do you think we've failed as CISOs or executive leaders or strategists in getting people to recognize that. I mean, I think we recognize that it is recognized as mainstream issues, right? Because of the bad guys and phishing, to be quite honest. But where have we gone wrong as a profession to make it more of a business issue? Because when you go into the boardroom or the suite meetings, everybody still looks at the CISO as like your fault. It's not even the CIO's fault. It's the CISO's fault. Where did we go wrong?
Yeah. And now we're in the
Mm-hmm.
day and age where we're
Yes.
looking at things like
Yes.
personal liability for CISOs. Yeah. So that's really
Yes. It
taken
certainly
on
has.
a life of its own. So I don't really look at it as where did we go wrong? Because when I look at how we
Mm-hmm.
do security these days,
Yeah.
there's a lot that we've done right. And when I say we, I mean, everybody in the profession. The thing that I've always kind of railed against as a writer has been the habits of security vendor marketing teams in an effort to sell products, really overhyping
Yes.
the need for their technology or the nature of a threat. And I think even there, security vendors have gotten better about it. I mean, I remember back in the day, you'd walk the RSA floor and you would have,
Yes.
you remember the booth babes. Um, so security vendors have gotten much better at really just focusing squarely
Mm-hmm.
on how their products address a
Right.
particular problem. That said, some are better than others. There are some that do things that I think are kind of loathsome, but I think most of them do the best they can. And I think some of my worldview there changed when I started doing things like going from journalistic roles to going and working at places like Akamai and Sophos, where I was dealing with content marketing and product marketing and also
Mm-hmm.
working from an InfoSec team, which at the time was Andy Ellis. He was CSO of Akamai for
Yeah.
um, a gazillion years.
Okay. I'm putting him on the
You should
list
have
now.
him on here soon if you haven't
Okay.
already. Put him on the list and ask him. These days, he calls himself the legendary CISO, which I make fun of
It has a good
every
French
chance I
word.
get, just
Yes.
because I'm 12 years old still. Uh, yeah, but I mean, there's another example though of somebody who gave me an opportunity. So I felt like if I was going to keep writing about cybersecurity, I needed to do more than interview people who do the work. I needed to be
Mm-hmm.
on a security team to really see how things happen. And the things I learned about customer service, you know, just the approach to
Yes.
customers,
Yes.
and uh, it that was huge. And so
Yeah.
I have Andy to thank for that. But I don't think anyone's failed. I think this is a profession where
Yeah.
technology changes so fast, especially now in the 2020s, you had the
Mm-hmm.
biggest cloud migration in history with the pandemic, so companies could stay operating, followed almost immediately by things like ChatGPT coming on the scene,
Right.
which
Right.
which has proven to be a big disruptor,
Right.
for better or worse. And the it's I think it's a lot easier if you're the bad guy and you're finding vulnerabilities to
Uh-huh.
exploit, and you're finding ways to use things like AI as an advantage, and you're looking at that big cloud migration and saying, gee, I'm sure these folks did this in a way that left
Right.
lots of vulnerabilities behind to exploit. And it did. Um, and it's just it's a lot harder if you're working for a company, and companies have their own individual values and priorities. It's really hard to stay ahead, and I think it always will be, which is, I think, one of the things that drives people
Mm-hmm.
to it, right? This puzzle problem to solve. The more insurmountable
Right.
the bigger the, I don't want to say rush, but the bigger the motivator to find a solution or a workaround. So all the CISOs I know, I've never looked at a big cyber
Yes,
incident
I
and said,
agree with
wow,
that.
that CISO really messed up. I've looked and said,
Yes.
man, that poor CISO, he or she is gonna take the fall for this. But most of the CISOs I have been lucky to
Right.
know, they do the best they can with the budgets they're able to get. And
Yeah.
I look at something like Solar Winds, and I think nobody was going to stop that from happening because
Yes.
the ground had been laid years in advance. And so, yeah, to me, it's not so much failure
I I can
versus winning.
yeah, I can appreciate
I think
that.
we all do the
I
best we
just
can,
think
and
though sometimes we do get caught up, and
yeah,
I mean get caught up in it all, right? We're fighting the good fight, and looking at our adversaries, and we're the poor schmucks in the corner that can blame for everything. We're like the stepchild of the C-suite. It's just it gets hard, and I just think that the maturity of our profession, especially at that level, right? Like the more senior you are, I think I would say we haven't done a good enough job to, and you hit on it, look at other aspects of an organization. Like you said, you wanted to become more immersed and familiar with cyber by working in a different capacity. I think as CISOs and strategists and executives, we need to immerse ourselves into finance. Like what's the goals, financial objectives, what are the strategic business objectives. So I think that's what I would hope we would navigate to. But how do we begin that shift? Any ideas?
well, here's one thing I've noticed in more recent years that is a good thing that I think will better enable what you're talking about. I remember, I think it was ShmooCon 2010 or something, the year the big blizzard hit Washington, D.C. And I went down to ShmooCon in an RV. We called it the Shmoo Bus. It was driven by Jack Daniel, a legend in the industry, who absolutely you should be interviewing for this at some point.
Sounds good.
That will probably be the most entertaining one you do. Um, but yeah, we would RV from Boston down to DC. Somewhere in there, we made a pit stop on an off ramp in New Jersey and picked up Matt Johansson, who has gotten pretty famous these days. Um, in his own right. But back then we were all just on this, we were heading down to ShmooCon to have a good time. And I mean, I was going down there to write articles. But back then, there was a lot of,
Right.
this isn't my job. That's not my job. There was a panel, and I can't remember the overriding topic,
Yeah.
but there was one fellow there who just kept going, poo-pooing everything, all the talk about best practices, because that wasn't his job. And then my old friend Jamie Arlen spoke up and he said, well, that's why you're never going to be the boss. And then he walked away as he sipped a beer, mic drop moment. And that extends to things like the ability to write, the ability to do public speaking. I have seen over the years a lot of cybersecurity practitioners really focus on those skills. And I think that has been a huge game changer. And now you look at a lot of folks who have been CISOs and equivalent roles, and
yeah, I was just going to say that's like
today.
The rise of the influencer. That's like a direct correlation, I'm sure.
Yeah. Matt Johansson got so busy being an influencer, he had to quit his day job. I mean, So yeah, I think that recognition that if you're going to get what you need in your security budget,
Yes.
you need to be able to talk to the board using board language. If you're dealing with a legal issue, you need to be able to speak on the lawyer's level. If you're, if you have to do something, if you have to win somebody over, it's really meeting them where they live and using language and images that they can understand. And I've seen a lot of security professionals just get better and better at that and excel. The challenge now is there are almost too many content creators out there to choose from. And so I think what becomes really of vital importance as we go into the next few years is having that ability to really zero in on the content that is going to serve us best in our professional role, and learning to
it's
kind of
interesting
cordon off all the
that you're
rest
saying
of the
this
noise.
because it's really hitting home. Again, like you, we've been around forever. So we've seen it, right? It's almost like Vampire Diaries of a CISO, right? We've seen it all through the years. And now look at where we are. And I will say, social media has had a positive and a negative impact on all of us. And it's funny because we talked exactly. In
Society
every
in
facet
general.
thereof, right? And we talked with Win Shorttoe, which I'm sure you remember Win, very colorful character. But he has
Oh yes,
this
of course.
soapbox campaign of late, and one of the messages is just stop the noise. We're getting so inundated, and I really feel that when you go on to like LinkedIn and social media, and it's like I feel like a failure as sometimes as a human being, but most of the time as a security professional, because I can't keep up, I can't absorb it all. And so how do we fine tune our personal intake to be to help us be the best person and professional that we can be. How do you cut out all that noise? Because, like you said, there's influencers all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's first, what are the security topics where you're spending most of your days? And basically forming your content, your social media diet around the folks who are focusing on those topics. And, maybe there's a great podcast out there about threat intelligence, but you're spending most of your time on the compliance side. And so you have to prioritize who is talking about that stuff, because that is what you need to stay sharp and learn new things.
Right.
Or at the very least, validate good ideas and
I think
validate when you think something is a bad
concur
idea.
with you, but it seems like, and it's not our fault. It's the algorithms that like shove this to you. And as CISOs, I just saw on LinkedIn this morning, there was somebody debating, like we as cybersecurity professionals have to know about all this technology. And then, like business just says cybersecurity. It's like, so like we're expected to know, seriously, we're expected to know everything. And how can you? So like, you fight that internal battle of like, well, I got to know about everything versus like you said, stay sharp, stay focused. So I really appreciate those words of advice from you. It's so simple, but hard.
But of course, it's the hardest thing on earth to do, because we're in a world where if you lose your phone for more than a couple of hours, it's like somebody cut off one of your senses. Sight, hearing, it's become like the sixth of the senses. And you spend a lot of that time glued to your phone, and people are making political opinions which may or may not be rooted in reality. And you mentioned the algorithms, Cailin, and those algorithms
Yes,
are really primed
exactly. to
Yep, keep the rages raging.
Rage bait drives engagement on social media. Like there are botnets and everything that are specifically designed.
Yeah. And I actually learned, I first learned of that term rage bait from my 14-year-old nephew, because I was teasing him, and he's saying how he wasn't going to take my rage bait. And
now, I remember the only rage bait we had in our profession was Ira Winkler. And I mean that with the utmost respect, because you did get engagement.
Hot takes. Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Now, if you want, you can spend several days on a cruise ship with him.
It has been a really...
Oh, you've done the cruise con thing?
And let's talk about that for a moment, because that's another thing, right? Like, go to a huge West Coast, shall remain nameless, but West Coast mega conference, and you get lost in that shuffle, whereas, it starts with an R and ends with an A. Yes.
Does it start with an R?
So the other end of that spectrum is the really small, intimate networking opportunities. And I think that's why that event you just mentioned. Yeah. So I think that's another aspect that we really benefit from in our profession, is that intimate, face-to-face, close networking and learning from each other, right?
It also helps that IRA is like absolutely no product pitches,
Yeah.
or you will get thrown overboard. So it's also kind of vendor agnostic.
Yeah, we like vendor agnostic. Make your own decisions.
Me too. Me too.
But I
I say
think
that in
that's
my
so
current role, we do a
interesting
lot of custom
because
content
you were so
for
passionate
security
about
vendors.
like
And so,
having marketing and like vendor marketing being specific to like not using buzzwords and everything. So I find it so interesting that you're in charge of that for your company now.
yeah, so it's interesting. It, so I'm spending a lot of my time in this role working with security vendors on, they'll buy programs that include articles, ebooks, going on our webcasts, going on the Security Weekly podcasts. And but the thing is, there's an opportunity there. This is where I have the ability to be on a call with a client and say, you might be overplaying the hype factor on this, or you might be focusing too much on pitching how your product is like the number one thing in the world, which it's not. Let me tell you what our audience comes to SC Media for, which is part of Cyber Risk Alliance. They're coming because they've been dealing with the same old problems for years, and they're always in pursuit of fresh guidance to more effectively deal with those problems. And so if you keep your focus there, you're going to resonate. And what I've found is when you talk to a security vendor marketeer and you go through that and you do it from the perspective of your audience, I'd say 8 out of 10 times they listen, they're receptive, and we end up creating content for them that has those qualities that our audience needs. And when I say our
Mhm.
audience, my audience, they're security practitioners. They're coming to the table already sophisticated and knowing the 101, if you will, and they're looking for that more advanced guidance and looking to learn more about how a particular security threat has evolved and of the technology that they have invested in over the years, what's working, what's not, and which security vendors are really taking the lead on learning about where the needs are now. And so, there's always going to be, and this isn't just security, this is
Yeah.
anything. You're always going to have the hype centers versus the focus on reality centers.
Yes.
And it's just that security is where we
I
live.
really, I,
So that's where we're
I'm
seeing it from.
relieved because again, seeing the different approaches from security vendors and their marketing messaging, I came from digital equipment and, we know what your problems are and we have that solution. We would tell, the customers what the problem was, so yeah. And,
I remember those days. That's how
yeah.
we met. I was going
So,
after you
it's
like,
kind of
I needed a
refreshing to
quote for
hear
an
it
article.
now because that has been a long standing trend, right? And goes back to the point we were talking about earlier too. Is like the hype centers are marketing and whatnot, and so I feel a lot of the vendors did drive some of the messaging and direction in cybersecurity programs. And I used to get really upset and say, I am not, and do not let your account representative define your security program. I mean, that's like the tail wagging the dog. So I'm so relieved to
Hmm.
hear that the now trend is to really listen to your customer base and solve their problems, because I remember walking that floor at RSA and saying, okay, well, what problem are you trying to solve that I have?
So this was one of the huge lessons. My role before
Mm-hmm.
this one, I was
Yep.
at IONS, IONS Research, and I was a director of research there during my time. And
Mm-hmm.
all of their expertise comes from a faculty, people who are in a variety of roles in the security industry, from the CISO level to the consulting level. And that was where I think I truly learned the importance of breaking down each topic just to the bare metal and really unpacking what the problems were versus
Mm-hmm.
what the solutions ought to be. And that's really stuck with me in the years since. The idea of if a piece of content can't help
Mm-hmm.
somebody somewhere, a piece of content is never going to help everyone. But if it can't help somebody, or at least make the effort to help somebody go back to their teams and try a few new things that might give them a leg up against the bad guys, then we're not doing the job. So, if there's a big breaking news story going on, one that comes to mind from last year was the whole CrowdStrike incident, where you had a lot of media that was really focused on, and then at the fault that black hat that year, there were T-shirts people were wearing and all these things picking on CrowdStrike, and um, but to me, I looked at that as, okay, where do I cut through the noise,
Right.
focus on what security teams should do about this, and in the end, that's all that matters. The who's to blame. I mean, yeah, it's important to learn
Yeah.
lessons, and failure, I've heard it said, is the greatest teacher. I think that's a Yoda-ism or
It
something.
is.
But it's true. And but there's a lot of, it can be irresistible when something's going on to really shame the victim.
No, I agree.
And nothing good ever comes from that in my mind. Unless the
Well, but the
victim
thing
was
is
selling snake oil to
I'm sure
begin
you'll
with.
agree. Well, not well, maybe from a
And there
bigger
have been some of
picture, like
those.
I hate to say vendor perspective, but when we look at like pointing the finger and blame, I have really not met like cyber professionals. We're all, we're the underdog. We're looking to do the right thing and all that. So like, I don't know about too many CISOs that are snake oil
Mhm.
salesmen per se. We're pretty solid bunch for the most part. I mean, every bunch of apples has its rotten apple, but yeah. So let's shift gears. I want to turn now,
Totally
speaking
agree.
of the good guys and all that. And you've mentioned several names, which again, thank you. I will definitely reach out to them and hook them into this History and Heroes podcast. But there have been a few people that were really special people that started the profession of back in the day, information security, now cybersecurity. Their voices are no longer heard because they have passed on. Our profession has been around that long. So thinking back, who was your hero that you would like to mention? Yeah.
Howard Schmidt. And you've probably heard that before. So here's why. You know, when I first started writing about security, here was a man who had been in these huge executive high up positions that you wouldn't expect to call back some, you know, reporter from some backwater publication. But he always took the time to call when I came knocking. He showed the importance of you can be in a position of power, but be the leader through kindness. And he was always that for me. And he also, when Obama first gave him that job, I was chasing him down to confirm it. And he called me back, but he also knew I was a bit of a history buff and I was interested in White House history.
Oh,
And he said, why don't you come down sometime, bring the family, and I'll give you the West Wing tour. And he did. And so, little show and tell here. You can see my bald head for a second.
oh,
So,
wow.
May 2010,
Wow,
photo
that
by
is
Howard
so,
Schmidt in the press briefing room. And so he really, you know, he connected with people on such a personal level. You hear a lot
yeah,
about the importance of meeting people where they live, and he was a master at that, no matter how big his job. And there are other folks like that who are still living, and I think it's important to mention
yes.
them too. But people like Mark Weatherford, who has been the CISO for the state of California, the CISO for the state of he actually was in the Obama administration at one point. And my favorite story with him was he got in trouble with the White House for giving a talk at it was Black Hat or DEF CON one year, where he was talking about, you know, you don't need these fancy degrees. And so, you know, the Obama White House takes education very
Yeah.
important and, you know, construed it a certain way. But there's a guy who just over the years has been a constant source of advice and reality checks. And so I think what I would say is we're remembering, as we're appreciating people who have passed on. Remember the
Yes.
folks who are still here too,
Yes. And that's
and
why
learn from
we're
them.
doing this special series of our podcast. It's so important to recognize the many different paths into greatness, shall I say. But I think if I could offer this, Bill, there's one major common denominator, and that's a lot of the luminaries, if not all, have grace. They have the time to reach out to people, to share their knowledge, to guide and direct people, embrace people, and celebrate each other, and not be, well, I need to be number one on, influencer list. I mean, that was not that was not any, like, when I think of Howard, that was like so not him. He was just him. And like you said, Mark Weatherford is him, Jim Rivas, and like all the people we've
Yeah.
had on the podcast, right?
Yep.
So it's
Jim
great.
Rivas is one. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of that, and a lot of security practitioners who have gone on to do their own podcasts and other media that are, sharing
Absolutely.
their knowledge, and you can learn from them every day.
But again, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate it very much. So, yeah, Cailin, you want to close this out, please?
Definitely. So just to reiterate, thank you, Bill. It was very enlightening, and we want to thank you for everything you've done and continue to do for the profession. And to our audience, don't forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up, like, and share with your friends, please. Any questions, leave in the comments. And yeah, until then.
Until next time, stay secure, stay refined.
And don't be afraid to get a little bit feral.